Welcome to Biohacking with Brittany, a podcast focused on holistic health, nutrition, biohacking, and more. I'm your host, Brittany Ford, registered holistic nutritionist and self-proclaimed biohacker. During the last 10 years, I've focused on healing my gut and hormonal issues through lifestyle changes, nutrition, and of course, biohacks. And now I teach others to do the same. I'm so excited you're joining me today, so let's dive right in. Great. Well, thank you for tuning in to another episode with me. Today, we're going to be diving into a couple of topics that I actually haven't talked about yet, mostly around thyroid and insulin resistance. I've definitely touched on hormones quite a bit in the past, but not really coming from this standpoint. So I'm bringing on Dr. Tim Jackson to help with this conversation and help educate us. He's educated in nutritional biochemistry, digestive health, and functional endocrinology. He's a functional medicine provider and a biohacker. And what's actually very interesting is when a few years ago, I was actually considering going into functional medicine myself. I was kind of deciding between that and naturopathy or nutrition and kind of what I wanted to do. So I think maybe in the future one day I'll go and study functional medicine just because I just love how holistic it is and rooted in finding the root cause to health concerns. So, Dr. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Brittany, for having me. I very much look forward to our conversation. I'm sure we'll deliver a lot of helpful and actionable knowledge.
Yeah, we will. So, for those who don't know, can you explain what functional medicine is?
Yes, so functional medicine has existed for quite a long time. Uh, Dr. Jeffrey Bland is accredited with the term or developing the term, but it's simply getting to the root cause of someone's issues. So if you have a headache, it's not because you're deficient in aspirin. If you have a mood issue, it's not because you're deficient in Prozac. And so, around the early 1900s, some of the big names in the country in terms of wealth in the United States, such as the Vanderbilts, Rockefellers, they took over the medical schools and they added in the pharmaceutical component. So, and they made anything else outside of that, outside of drugs and surgery, considered voodoo or alternative. So functional medicine, a lot of times the term gets used interchangeably with alternative medicine, but functional medicine is probably more, I wouldn't say probably, it is more scientific than traditional allopathic medicine in 98% of the cases because you're looking at someone's biochemistry, their lab work, any hiccups or imbalances in their guts, their electrolytes, their neurotransmitters, hormones, and you're balancing those. And so essentially, if you want to boil it down and make it pretty digestible, functional medicine is about getting the bad stuff out of your body and putting the good stuff into your body.
Cool. I love that. It's interesting how aligned it is with biohacking, actually. Like when you talk about getting lab results and data and then figuring out how to optimize it, like that is exactly what I feel like biohackers do. So I totally see how you're a biohacker and a functional medicine expert. Like I see how it goes hand in hand very easily.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it all exists on a continuum. And sort of one of my life goals is, I'm very into working out and lifting weights. And, it never really made sense to me. Like, I go to the gym all the time and I see guys who have huge shoulders, huge arms, but they look like they haven't had a bowel movement in a decade. And so one of my goals is to really combine, functional medicine with the gym atmosphere and biohacking, because, the time to do something or find out about, your health is now. And so if you look for imbalances, it's not trying to create problems, but it's trying to get out in front of them
Yeah.
because, we live in a toxic world. We're all exposed to stressors. of various sorts. And so, yeah, I think you're spot on with that analysis.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think it's very interesting that you are trying to kind of merge all those different fields because that is not something that I really see that's out there currently and is definitely needed. So if someone were to go see a functional doctor today, what type of benefits could they see that's different if they went to their like typical doctor?
So they can see benefits in a number of ways. First of all, let's say you have some lab work that you just had done at a traditional doctor's office. You can take that same lab work to someone like myself or another functional medicine provider, and they're going to have a totally different analysis of it. And so, functional medicine, our lab ranges and our interpretation of lab work is very different because we know what those markers are associated with, and we don't wait for them to get out of range to address them. Because if you think about how the quote unquote normal ranges are calculated, they're calculated based on a bunch of sick people. And, I forget who said the quote, he who becomes adapted to a maladapted world is himself maladapted.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, I think, so there's that benefit in terms of you're going to get a totally different view into your physiology and what's going on with you. But so you may come in with an issue, let's say brain fog. Let's say that's your chief complaint. But the issue may be coming from your gut. Usually it's going to be several contributing factors. And that's the main thing functional medicine focuses on as well. It's not, outside of trauma, like car accidents, boating accidents, things like that. You really don't have these singular causes where A causes B and then that leads to C. It's more like A, B, C, D, E, and F all are circling around you, and in you can have 10 people with the same exact symptoms, but one person's symptoms, 10% of them may be caused by gut issues. 40% may be caused by hormonal imbalances, 20% by neurotransmitter imbalances. And so you're going to get that full body analysis. And, sometimes, in very rare instances, we do need people who are hyper specialized. But most of the time, let's take, for example, congestive heart failure. So if you have low testosterone, low growth hormone, and low levels of the amino acid taurine, you're most likely going to develop heart failure at some point. And so, you could get treated by a cardiologist, you could have stents placed in your coronary arteries, but none of that is going to fix the hormonal imbalances. And, if you think about it, it's not conspiracy theory, but, most of medicine is procedural based. So even the codes are CPT codes, and the P stands for procedural. And so you get paid based on doing procedures. So, there's no really incentive for them to sit down with you and discuss your lifestyle, what you're eating like, what your social support system is. But
Mhm.
then also, you're going to get some other lab work ordered for you that gives you windows into different aspects of your physiology. And you can't go wrong with starting with the gut. That's where I usually begin in most cases, with a few exceptions. But you're also going to have 24-hour hormone panels ran. You're going to have your heavy metal levels checked. You're going to have your mitochondrial energy production checked. You're going to have the detection or testing for stealth pathogens like Epstein-Barr, HHV6, parvovirus, Lyme, things of that nature. And so you may have an issue that you never. So, like when I was in school, they taught us that if someone has hypothyroidism or their thyroid's not optimal, they're going to lose the outer one third of their eyebrows. and they're going to be massively overweight. And that's just simply not true.
Mm.
I mean, I've seen people who were underweight and had a hypothyroidism. And so you get a totally different analysis, and then you're going to get a long-term plan depending on how that particular provider works to restore your optimal physiology, and not only restore it, but the goal is to take you to a whole new level.
Yeah, and it's so interesting, and I love how, like, personalized that is, because that's kind of the approach that you need in order to actually get successful results compared to a procedure, like you said, or kind of like this one size fits all band-aid approach that a lot of people take. So it's very specific. In terms of insulin resistance, like, what is, I feel like this word just kind of floats around a lot and people
Mhm.
might not actually understand what that means. So, what does it mean? And for the average person, like, just listening to this or just out there, like, how would they know if they might be insulin resistant themselves?
Yeah, so I started noticing this phenomenon when, between undergrad and my doctorate program, I took classes part time, but in the morning and in the evenings, I was a personal trainer at a private studio. And I started noticing people who were very fit, who did very well with their nutrition. I knew they were being honest about it, and they were, developing type 2 diabetes. And so that really piqued my interest. I'm like, how can this be? Because one of the benefits of exercise, specifically weight training or resistance training, is you get an upregulation of what are called the GLUT4 receptors. And those are receptors that increase insulin sensitivity. But today, we're the average baby born today, and at least in the United States, has on average between 250 to 300 known carcinogens in the umbilical cord, and that's just carcinogens. So that's not heavy metals, that's not pathogens. So you're starting out your life in a toxic world, but your body's already toxic. And as we age, people think that, oh, metabolism just slows down, but actually, what happens in the majority of cases is you get a bioaccumulation of toxins, because when your body's exposed to toxins and your detox pathways are overwhelmed, basically you're going to get toxins stored in fat, and that's to protect your internal organs from any sort of damage. And so insulin resistance, there's a insulin resistance test that we can run, at least here in the States, through LabCorp, but several other labs also offer it. And you can also look at uh, glycosylated hemoglobin or hemoglobin A1C levels. But one quick point I wanted to make about that some people don't think about is hemoglobin A1C can be a little misleading, because the average lifespan of a red blood cell is 120 days. But the more misshaped and glycosylated those cells become, the more quickly they get degraded. So it can be a little misleading. That's why I like to run it along with fasting blood sugar and fasting insulin.
Mm. Yeah. So I guess if you were listening and you weren't, or you were thinking maybe like that is something that you might have, you would have to run the test to kind of like see where your blood work is at, because like you said, like, I think the symptoms can vary so much, right?
Yeah, and don't assume that you have to be overweight to have insulin resistance.
Hmm.
I wrote an article for the Huffington Post back in 2013, and it was titled "Five Reasons You Can't Lose Weight." And basically, the premise of the article is that when you have stealth pathogens, so let's use the example of Epstein-Barr virus, since many people know that one, it creates an inflammatory cascade. And so you get these pro inflammatory molecules called cytokines that are released. And that damages your insulin receptors. and contributes to insulin resistance. And so inflammation, chronic low level inflammation is at the root cause of essentially every disease and syndrome known to man. And so one of the contributing factors to that is the reactivation of pathogens because, especially with the pandemic, a lot of people I heard saying, that you would clear the virus, but you never clear a virus. What happens is its DNA gets incorporated into our DNA. So every time our cells divide, their DNA gets divided as well. But normally we're able to silence their DNA through a process called methylation. And I'm not sure if you've discussed that on the show already, but methylation is essentially a series of about 200 or so biochemical reactions that are responsible for producing many or most of your neurotransmitters, glutathione, some of your white blood cells, and detoxifying hormonal metabolites such as estrogen.
Yeah. I mean, again, like it makes a lot of sense. And I think that it's probably more common than people actually even realize.
Oh, yeah.
Um, and if you've never heard of it, right, like you would never assume that you would have something like that. But aside from, lifting weights and a proper nutrition plan, like what can we even do in terms of like dealing with these toxins and pathogens? Is it just like supporting the liver and supporting detox pathways? And if it is, like, what does that look like that actually works?
Yeah, so a couple things. One is most people don't know, and I didn't know, and to be perfectly honest, until about 5 years ago, that we have more lymphatic fluid than we do blood in our body. And, the heart or the cardiovascular system has the benefit of the blood being pumped throughout the body. So it's getting returned to the heart. But the lymphatic system relies on muscular contractions. So even if you're going to the gym, say 4 to 5 days a week for 45 minutes to an hour, if you're sedentary at your job and sitting at a desk most of the day, then getting that lymphatic system moving is definitely going to be helpful because that's basically the garbage disposal system for the body. So let's say our immune system kills a pathogen. Well, those complexes, they're called antigen antibody complexes, they get dumped into the lymphatic fluid. And so when it's hyperviscous and basically crystallizes or gets stuck, then you get issues in terms of not being able to detoxify, issues with energy, immune system issues. And you actually have a lymphatic system that's specific to your brain called the glymphatic system. And there's a therapy called incline bed therapy. You can look it up online. There's a whole website dedicated just to that. And basically, you elevate the head of your bed 6 to 12 inches over time, and you sleep that way because it facilitates the drainage of toxins from your brain and central nervous system. And so, in terms of getting the lymphatic system moving, I have personally a chi machine, which is a device. They're on Amazon for about $250 and probably cheaper now. You lay down, put your ankles in it, and they vibrate side to side. There's also now you can get the vibration plates for around $200, and that has many benefits. It increases bone density, it stimulates the stabilizing muscles around your joints, and it also gets your lymphatic system moving. So my ex-girlfriend has one, and I got on it. I started watching a TV program and really lost track of time. And I said, "Oh, this thing isn't doing anything." But I was on there for about 45 minutes, which is not a good idea to start with. And a couple hours later, 3 to 4 hours later, I all I could taste was metal in my mouth. And
Wow.
so that, and then the other one that most people have heard of is a mini trampoline or a rebounder,
Mhm. Mhm.
jumping up and down on that. Obviously, if you have balance issues, there are ones that come with a handle, for safety precautions. But I like the vibration plates if you have enough room for it, because especially for women, it has the added benefit of helping with bone density. And I've seen several reports. I don't know if it's conclusive yet, but I think it's 35 hertz that somehow stimulates the production and release of growth hormone.
Hmm.
And so the lymphatic system, there's many ways. One other way I wanted to mention that I just ordered this device. I got it in and I haven't installed it yet, but it's a structured water device that goes underneath your sink. And so structured water, it's not H2O, it's H3O2, which is the form that our cells can use. And basically, what it does is it makes the nutrients that you get from food and supplements better absorbed, more bioavailable, better absorbed, and delivered into the cell. And it also has the added benefits of reducing inflammation and oxidative stress.
That is so interesting. I definitely want to know the name of the brand that you use for that because I have played around with structured water myself, but it's never been in a honestly, to be honest, like a sustainable way. Like I just need something that goes right underneath the sink and does it for me. So we can like talk about that after. But another thing that people can do for this type of thing is even like dry brushing can be great, or
Yeah.
getting regular massages as well, because that can really just help move the lymph in a way that
Mhm.
we might not necessarily do it very often. Like I even have one of those massage guns, and that can help as well, just manually actually pushing it and like getting it moving and out of the body.
Yeah, and as a side note, one thing that I haven't heard anyone else really mention is that the presence of oxalates, which are these crystal-like compounds that exist in some foods. So, for example, green smoothies are loaded with them.
Mm.
And normally you have a bacteria in your gut called Oxalobacteria formigenes that will break down the oxalates. But when you have an overgrowth of candida, or presence of mold and mycotoxins in the body, those also produce oxalates. And so the detoxification systems get overwhelmed, and the lymphatic system can essentially become crystallized. And so you have to take the proper supplements. So one nutrient is the active form of B6, P5, P50, pyridoxal 5 phosphate. That helps with dissolving oxalates, and so does vitamin B1 or thiamine.
I'd like to interrupt this podcast today to talk to you about Inside Tracker. So, the truth is that people age at different speeds. The date that marks your birthday doesn't necessarily reflect your body's biological age, or known as your inner age with Inside Tracker. Learning your biological age can definitely seem daunting at first, and I felt the same way when I did this test. But it's more than just a simple measurement, it's a starting point for you to take control of your health and wellness journey. Inside Tracker is a personalized nutrition platform that analyzes your blood, DNA, lifestyle, and now fitness trackers to help you optimize your performance from the inside out. First, they analyze your body's biomarker data to offer you a clear picture of what's going on inside. Then they provide science backed recommendations for positive diet and lifestyle changes and track your progress every step of the way. If you're interested in this, definitely check it out. I'm so happy I did it. I learned a lot about what's going on for me. You can use my discount code biohacking Brittany through the link in the show notes, and that will get you 25% off both testing your biological age and any of the other tests and products as well. So that's biohacking Brittany for 25% off. Interesting. So how does this relate to the thyroid? Just a bit of like a backstory. like I've been doing so many health tests for so long, and just been in the health space even before I knew what biohacking was. And I remember when I was a teenager, I think, yeah, um, I did a hair mineral analysis with a naturopath. And one of the things that they suspected even back then was me being hypothyroid, or
Hmm.
having that. And I totally brushed it off at the time. I didn't really understand what it was. And I didn't really understand like how big of a deal that was. Is it something to be super concerned about? But just recently, my fiance, he has been having very interesting symptoms in the last like 8 months, 10 months. And he has a history of thyroid problems in his family. And I told him, I was like, I think you have like I think your thyroid is sluggish. I don't think it's working properly, because of the symptoms he was dealing with. And we
Hmm.
went into a naturopath close to us. We got him tested, and it was exactly right. Like his hormones were not where they needed to be. And so we put him on along with some other things, but we put him on like a thyroid complex that
Hmm.
has like tyrosine in it, zinc, copper, manganese, oh my gosh, I'm reading it right now. Manganese, iodine, selenium, and ashwagandha in it. And like
Hmm.
within a month, he was feeling better. Like it's crazy. Like all of his symptoms have gotten better. And it like, so we're going to retest his thyroid. But anyway, that's just like where I'm coming from. It's just so interesting the role of the thyroid in your health.
Yeah, so the thyroid, I mean, there's a reason they monitor it closely when a woman is pregnant, because if thyroid hormone levels are too low, then that's going to set the baby up for mental retardation and learning disabilities.
Wow.
And so, it's incredibly important. Every cell in your body has receptors for thyroid hormone, and traditional medicine typically tests for TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, but that simply tells you how your brain is communicating with your thyroid gland. It doesn't tell you about the levels of the actual thyroid hormones, T4, T3, and I almost never see anyone test T2, but uh, they generally test TSH and total T4, or maybe free T4. But the important markers to look at, I mean, those are important, but you also want to look at free T3.
Mhm.
And so that's, think of that as your body's gas pedal. And so, in terms of how it affects the body, if it's suboptimal, and I define suboptimal as anything below 3.5 nanograms per deciliter, and that's based on our units here in the US, so it may be different, there. But if it's below that, if your free T3 levels are below that, your risk for cholesterol issues goes way up. And that's one of the reasons thyroid has been improperly tested and treated, is because up until the late 70s, or maybe early 80s, having high cholesterol was a diagnostic marker for low thyroid function.
Mm.
And then the statin drug makers came in and they said, hey, we can make a ton of money if we keep lowering the cholesterol requirements. And so that's essentially what happened. And that's why thyroid doesn't get tested as much. Also, the potential side effects of thyroid medication
Mm.
have been blown out of proportion. And so, a lot of doctors are afraid to prescribe either a T4, T3 combo or T3 alone. So I take T3 alone, just a fraction of a dose every day, just to keep me, in the optimal range. But other thyroid markers that are equally as important, one is reverse T3. And so we talked about T4, that's your inactive thyroid hormone. When it converts to T3, some of it naturally will go into the form of reverse T3. But if you have a number of situations present, such as high estrogen, high cortisol, really low cortisol, those can all cause reverse T3 to increase. And so even if your free T3 is 3.5 or higher, if your reverse T3 is in the top 25% of the range, then it's likely blocking some of your free T3 from getting inside the cells. And that's what we call cellular hypothyroidism.
Mm, yeah. So if someone hasn't been tested yet and doesn't know their biomarkers, what are the typical symptoms and signs that people with a low thyroid um, show? And yeah, are there common ones, or is there like a bigger range that you see?
Yes, there are a number of them, and I'll just kind of give you the main ones that I see. So I have a colleague who's a PA, physician's assistant, and her major symptom, if she doesn't take her thyroid medication, is major brain fog. And she's super intelligent, she's brilliant. And so brain fog is one of the primary ways because we'll talk about the mitochondria in a little bit, but T3 gets converted into T2, and that's on the level of the mitochondria. So the mitochondria are the batteries of our cells, and they're impacted by thyroid hormone levels, and they impact thyroid hormone levels. Other symptoms that you may see, inability to recover from exercise or working out, decreased physical or mental endurance, uh, trouble with digestion, so
Mm.
sluggish bowels. You can develop constipation, or at least over time you can. You may have some hair loss. You may have some weight gain. Um, and I would say those are probably the primary ones. But the other thing is, so it's really important, especially in today's world, to monitor your body temperature.
Hmm.
And a lot of people, they'll go to their doctor and it's 97.5 or 4. And they say, oh, that's fine, that's great. But anytime it drops even a few tenths of a degree, your immune function drops dramatically. And so you can take all the antimicrobial supplements and treatments you want, but until your body temperature day to day is 98.6, you won't be able to recover. And that's why, hyperthermia under partial anesthesia is used as a major treatment throughout most parts of Europe.
That is so interesting. So I take my temperature every morning before I get up because that's how I track my menstrual cycle. And
Mhm.
I've been doing that since 2018, maybe. So I have all of the data in this app. And of course, like as you know, right, like in the first half of your cycle, your temperature is lower and then you ovulate and then your temperature is higher. So
Mhm.
is that 98.6 applicable for women? Because for myself, before I ovulate, I am definitely lower than that, like easily lower than that. So I'm not sure what like the ideal range is for, or like the ideal level is like for the first half of your cycle.
Yeah, so even for guys, a certain diurnal or 24-hour variation in temperature is normal.
Hmm.
And so your temperature, at least in the first part of the evening, is going to be one of the highest points of the day. Mid afternoon may be the highest. And so I would say just be consistent.
Mm.
Maybe check, if you can, 3 different times during the day. Do that consistently for 2 to 3 months and look at the pattern. And
Mm.
so, a colleague of mine, he's been treating thyroid disorders for 40 plus years or more. And he says he recommends taking an oral temperature and an axillary temperature several times, 2 to 3 times a day, and averaging those values out. But yeah, you're exactly right in terms of it being lower at the beginning of a cycle. So I think, when you're not, in your cycle, um, then that's when you want to take it to see what your basal metabolic rate is. Because what happens, and Dr. Kent Holtorf came up with this term, cellular hypothyroidism. But when the blood is hyperviscous or very thick, and that can happen from a number of things, from toxicity or certain toxins to pathogens, then your body temperature is going to be low because the thyroid hormone can't get inside the cell. But you mentioned your fiance's supplement has some ashwagandha in it,
Mm-hmm.
and that's one thing. So if you're on thyroid medication already and you decide to start ashwagandha, be very careful, not trying to scare anyone, but ashwagandha helps escort T4 into the cell and convert it into T3. And so you can easily become hyper. And so you may
Mm.
have to decrease your dose. One other thing that I'll mention that doesn't have a lot of science behind it yet, there's a lot of anecdotal experience, especially in the biohacking community, and that's using red light therapy on the thyroid gland.
Right.
So one thing I'll mention about the thyroid gland is that the thyrocytes, the cells that make up the thyroid gland, they're extremely sensitive to free radicals and oxidative stress. And so when you have a lot of oxidative stress and inflammation throughout the body, the thyroid cells become very, very sensitive and they detect that. And so the red light therapy works on the level of the mitochondria. So it helps stimulate ATP, aka energy production, in the cells, and it also helps to expedite healing. So even in traditional hospitals up until the 80s, it was used for wound care. But if you can increase the tissue ATP for any tissue, it's going to expedite healing dramatically.
I want to pause this episode briefly to talk to you about emphies. So, if you've been following me for a while now, you know that this is something that I have really been pouring myself into to develop for you. Emphies are healthier underwear for women made by women. They protect against EMF, radiation, and bacteria. And they do that through the type of fabric that I'm using. I've started going to sewing classes and pattern making private lessons in order to make sure that these are very modern, comfy, and cute, and not granny panties, unlike the couple of options on the market right now. So this is super important. The underwear protects the female reproductive parts, specifically the ovaries, from all of the radiation that's around us. So in our car, from Bluetooth, from our phone, from computers, from Wi-Fi, all sorts of things. And this matters, right? Like we're learning more and more about how our environment impacts our health. And EMF is tough and radiation is tough because we actually can't see it. So it's kind of one of those things that we just don't necessarily think about because we can't like visually see it on a day-to-day basis, but that does not mean it's not impacting our health. And the science backs us up now. There are countless studies on this, on how EMF can impact fertility, ovulation, pregnancy, also like cancer and mitochondrial health. The ovaries are actually the most dense organ in the body that has mitochondria in it. They have 100,000 mitochondria per cell in the ovaries, like per cell. That is insane. And so we really want to make sure that those little mitochondria are doing their best, are functioning at their best. And we want to block any EMF, any radiation from impacting how they function, because I want women to have healthy cycles and healthy hormones and healthy pregnancy and fertility, and not have further, much more serious complications in the future. So, this underwear helps you get there like one step closer. And so that's exactly why I developed it. And so pre-orders are coming this summer. I'm really, really excited about it. It's gonna be a lot of fun, and it has been a lot of fun in the months that I have been developing them. So if you're interested in getting on the wait list, the waitlist can be found at biohackingbrittany.com/EMFIES. That's EMFIES. Super easy. Or you can just go to the link in my Instagram bio. You can just sign up right through there as well. So definitely get on that wait list. It's growing pretty quickly. And everyone on the wait list will have early access to pre-orders, which is super important because it's going to be quite a limited quantity to start, I think. So get on the wait list. And yeah, if you have any further feedback, I'm always open to hear what you think and what you're looking for, even product wise. Yeah, and a bunch of you have already asked me if I'm going to be creating things for children or for men, which is very interesting. But I think we're going to focus just on the females for now. So get on the wait list, and I look forward to dropping these very soon. Yeah, I find it so interesting. I feel like the thyroid is almost like underrated in terms of like how impactful it is on our health. So in terms of, I know we kind of like briefly talked about this, but like how it impacts other parts of the body and other hormones. Is there a
Mhm.
connection between the thyroid and fertility for women and for men, I guess, but more for women in terms of ovulation and like regular cycles? And I ask that from a selfish standpoint because my cycle can kind of be all over the place. And so now that I'm trying to heal the thyroid, I'm wondering if that is kind of getting more to the root cause and it will actually help regulate my cycle better.
Yeah, so thyroid has some interesting interactions with other hormones. When we talk about thyroid hormone, sometimes, I worked at a clinic in North Carolina for a while, and the nurse practitioner that I shared the clinic with, she would put pretty much every patient on Armour thyroid, which is a mixture of T4 and T3. And a lot of them would come back to me saying, "Oh, Dr. Tim, I'm having heart palpitations." Well, that's sort of a hallmark sign of someone who has low thyroid, so they need thyroid medication, but they also most likely have low cortisol. So you have to treat the HPA-T axis, hypothalamus pituitary adrenal thyroid axis, together. And so if cortisol is low, you want to bring it up and find out why it's low. That's where the root cause analysis comes in. But you definitely want to get your thyroid or cortisol levels up, so because that helps escort thyroid hormone into the cells.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I when I tested my cortisol a few years ago, again, like I don't know how relevant this is to now. Like I think I tested in 2018. I had a cortisol curve, but it was lower than what it should be. So I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
flatlined, but it was just lower. And so it I don't know, like I don't know if it's the same as then. Like life is so different right now for me than it was back then. But I'm also taking a adrenal glandular, and I started that at the same time I started taking this thyroid matrix because of that very reason of like how interconnected the thyroid and adrenal glands are, and I knew that I needed to support both. So I'm very curious to see in the next few months like how things kind of progress, because this is a very different approach that I'm taking right now. So it's very timely that you've come on.
Yeah, I mean, what I see is in terms of the cortisol test, one thing that 98 to 99% of them don't show is a transport protein called CBG, or
Mm.
cortisol binding globulin. And so your cortisol levels, let's say your test results from 2018 showed that you were optimal. Well, it doesn't show how high or how low cortisol binding globulin is. And so if all that cortisol is bound up, then your cells can't use it, right?
Right.
And so, that brings me to my next point. You know, because functional medicine, especially the use of bioidentical hormones, is becoming so prevalent, hormone clinics are popping up all over. But you got to be careful when you can't just throw someone on estrogen or testosterone without looking at the basic hormones, meaning insulin
Mm.
and blood sugar, along with thyroid hormone and cortisol. And so, if someone has low testosterone, they may in fact need testosterone replacement therapy, but you can't do that, or you shouldn't do that, at least in my opinion, and what I've seen clinically, until you've addressed the HPAT axis.
Yeah, I agree with you. I tried bioidentical hormones for the first time last year. It was progesterone. I don't know, like what the
Mm-hmm.
brand was or whatever. Um, and this was back when, like, last year my cycles were like, we're really getting into my health in this episode, but it's fine. Last year my cycles were very long, like they were like 90 days. Like I just wasn't ovulating. And then when I did ovulate, it was like 14 days and my period came and it was totally normal. But it was just getting to the ovulation was the problem. And so I tried the progesterone, and it helped obviously, but I only use it for one cycle because I was worried that if I continued to take bioidentical hormones, it would kind of be the same thing as like a band aid solution, right? Like I'm just taking these hormones and then my body's doing this function. But if I don't take the hormones, then it doesn't function. So, how is that really helping me? Like, is it just kind of like a
Right.
quick fix? Not that I'm against them, but so that's my caution with bioidentical hormones is like, can we become reliant on them? And like how do we take a better approach?
So, so my analysis is that I always, work on the gut, the mitochondria, the other hormones we've discussed, and then you may not need um, any bioidentical hormones, but even if you do, the dose most likely won't be as high. But in order for you to receive the benefits from those bioidentical hormones, you have to fix the other imbalances first.
Mm.
And you mentioned progesterone. So there's a phenomenon known as progesterone steal. So your body is going to do what it needs to do to keep you alive. So it's saying, Brittany, I don't care about your progesterone. I just want you to stay alive. So I'm going to create cortisol if there's a need
Mhm.
for it. So if you're supplementing with progesterone, and I've worked with patients who were on 200 milligrams per day, and their levels were still very, very, very low. And that's because it was getting diverted into cortisol. So take it one step further, and you'll see that the reasons for that are inflammation from pathogens, gut dysbiosis, stress, poor sleep hygiene. And so, in terms of if you're addressing all of those variables and then you still need progesterone, I think it's totally fine.
Mhm.
Um, but in terms of testosterone, your diet plays a big role in terms of the quality of protein you eat, eating healthy fats, supplementing post workout with some essential amino acids or a mixture of essential amino acids and branched chain amino acids. But all of those variables must be in place. And, in terms of when to use hormone replacement, because we're exposed to so many toxins today, a lot of those toxins are endocrine disrupting chemicals, meaning they disrupt your hormonal system. And so that leads to a host of issues. And if our sex hormone levels are low, for example, with testosterone, it's been shown that for men, if your level is below 550 nanograms per deciliter, your risk for all cause mortality, so your risk of dying from anything, goes up exponentially.
Hmm.
And so it's not just, testosterone isn't just for building muscle and having a high sex drive. It's very important for heart health, for brain health. For men, it impacts their body temperature. And guys, if you're having testosterone or low libido issues, don't automatically assume that it's low testosterone. It could also be low thyroid. And so again, that's why you want to address that first and see how far that gets you before you jump on testosterone replacement.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting. So my fiance, he started getting cold hands and feet about 8 months ago or so. And I've known him for so long, and he never ever had that. And I
Mm-hmm.
knew when that started, I was like, okay, there's something going on here. But as well, like you said, like low libido, just I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's also like a pandemic and everything we're going through, but still, he's too young to have like that low of a libido.
Right,
And then like hair loss as well, and low energy, right? Like not
yeah,
being able to like falling asleep easily, but struggling to get out of bed, feeling sluggish, like meh all day.
right,
So it's been so interesting to see how supporting his thyroid has made him feel so much better. Um,
right.
and so, like, even the cold hands and feet is much better now. Like, if I touch his hands, they're actually a normal temperature. It's really crazy.
And that's a good point because testosterone, I know for certain in men, and I'm 99% sure in women, it affects the first and I think maybe second step in the Krebs cycle, which
Mm,
is the mitochondrial energy production cycle. And so that's the mechanism behind testosterone impacting your body temperature.
right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, if someone takes like some sort of supplement that has like minerals in it, maybe there's like a glandular extract in it as well, or an adaptogen or whatever. Um, Can someone take that and just kind of feel like they're supporting their thyroid or adrenal and just kind of take that for a few years? Or is that going to like stop being as supportive at one point, or you don't recommend people kind of take supplements for that long?
You can't. I recommend that people actually do, especially in today's world, because let's say you've optimized your physiology in terms of detoxing heavy metals, any environmental chemicals, mold. You fixed your gut in terms of dysbiosis. You've optimized your neurotransmitters. Then you're still going to be exposed to a number of physical and mental stressors on a day-to-day basis.
Mm,
But what I recommend doing is rotating your adaptogens.
right.
So I might do rhodiola for 1 month, then I might do a blend of adaptogens the next month that may or may not have rhodiola. And the next month I'll do something different, and then I'll start the rotation over. But the key there is you're using it for as a legitimate adaptogen and not as a coping mechanism because you want to make sure you're addressing those root causes.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Again, well, this was so good. I feel like I just learned so much from you. Where can people connect with you? And yeah, like how can they work with you if they're interested?
Yeah, so my website is https:// healyourbody.org. So again, that's healyourbody.org. And you can fill out the contact Dr. Tim form or apply to work with Dr. Tim form on there. And if you use the code Brittany10 in the email, then I will offer 10% off an initial 1 hour consultation.
Amazing. Oh, that's so awesome. I hope people definitely use that and take you up on that because this type of work is so, so helpful. So again, like thank you for coming on. And I think people have gained a lot from this. So yeah.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for the work that you're doing.
Ah, no worries. Thank you so much for tuning in today. As always, feel free to screenshot this episode and tag me if you'd like me to respond. I really hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. If you have a question about your health, my DMs are always open and I'm currently taking new clients. Thanks and see you next time.